As far as handling with these guys is concerned, these guys naturally can be a little bit more flighty of a species. And as you see here, I have my friend in this little cup because they're not super wild about handling. But having said that, hey everybody, welcome to the Tye-Dyed Iguana channel. My name's Collin, and in today's video, we're gonna be talking all about care of the African fire skink. So, a little bit of natural history on these guys. These guys are native to forests in Central Africa. They are a diurnal insectivore, so they're awake during the day, and their primary diet is gonna be insect protein. As far as average size for these guys, they do get about 12 to 15 inches in length. And as far as sexing goes, it is a little bit easier to tell the difference between the male and the females because they naturally reach different size ranges. As far as lifespan for your African fire skink, with good care, these guys can on average live anywhere from 12 to 15 years in captivity. Well, first thing we'll talk about today is enclosure size. So, to start off, a young African fire skink or a smaller fire skink, what we'd recommend here at the Tye-Dyed Iguana would be a terrarium that's approximately 30 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, or also known as a 20-gallon long. And that would be a good enclosure size as far as starting out with a small individual or a baby. For an adult, we would recommend a terrarium that's about 36 inches by 18 by 18, also known as a 50-gallon tank or also known as a 40-gallon breeder. You definitely want more floor space that compared to height, because these guys are terrestrial. They're gonna spend most of their time on the ground or burrowed. Next thing we'll discuss for these guys is gonna be temperature and lighting. As far as heating goes for these guys, we're gonna recommend a basking spot of about 90 to 95 degrees on the warm side directly under the basking bulb. For these guys, we recommend using a tight beam basking bulb. That way the heat will be put directly down on the basking area for the animal. Ambient temperature during the day can be in the upper 70s to low 80s, and then nighttime temperature can be in the mid to low 70s for these guys. As far as UVB goes, there's several options. Depending on the size of the tank, you could use an appropriate wattage mercury vapor bulb, and a lot of people also prefer to use T5 bulbs. T5s are a great option. If you go with a T5 UVB source, be sure to get a 5.0 bulb, as that'll be the correct intensity for this species. They don't need super high levels of UVB, so something in the middle 5.0 range is gonna be ideal for these guys. As far as enclosure setup goes, we know these guys' natural behaviors, they're terrestrial, so they spend most of their time on the ground. So generally, as far as the overall layout of the tank, I like to give myself the minimum of probably like 4 inches, but if you can provide 6 inches of substrate depth, that's gonna be absolutely ideal. These guys love to burrow, and in fact, they're almost just like a sandfish. The way they can go through moist bedding and just slither through it and burrow down is quite impressive. And in fact, a lot of the time, when your animal's not out basking or eating, you'll see that he's nowhere to be seen in the enclosure. That's because these guys love to burrow in the substrate, so remember with your enclosure setup, you wanna have a deep substrate layer. Very important for these guys. So let's talk about what type of substrate we would recommend for an African fire skink. So these guys, being a subtropical species, they're gonna like a bedding that retains nice levels of moisture and humidity. So beddings that we would recommend personally here at the Tye-Dyed Iguana would be like our tropical mix bedding would be a great option. That's a mixed texture bedding, can really help as far as adding humidity to the enclosure and as well giving it a little bit more naturalistic texture. You can also use products such as Zoomed's Repti-Soil, that's a great option. And then also Zilla makes a product called Jungle Mix. But my personal pick would be our Tropical Mix. As far as enclosure setup as well, it can be a really nice idea to have a layer of leaf litter, such as our Nature's Carpet, and that there's a twofold benefit to this. Number one, it can provide coverage for the lizard, especially when burrowing. But the second thing is if you have a cleanup crew like isopods and springtails in there, that can provide a nice little microclimate to keep your cleanup crew nice and moist in between your spraying. As far as setup for these guys goes, it's going to be fairly similar to any terrestrial tropical lizard you have. So we like to provide a nice basking spot, use a nice piece of large stone or large slate for a nice basking area. Some people also like to have a nice piece of driftwood in there. With these guys, you really can't overdo it on the furnishings. And as well, these guys are one of the best candidates for doing a bioactive enclosure. So having a bunch of live plants, springtails and isopods in there, a cleanup crew, especially with having that super deep substrate layer, is gonna be absolutely the way to go with these guys. They do love to have plenty of that deep, moist substrate, like I said. Like to provide a nice sized water bowl, doesn't have to be anything gigantic. And then plenty of cover. You may not necessarily have to use hides, but you definitely wanna have like some cork flats, some stones, things like that, that can go in the enclosure. One tip with these guys is too, because they are so active of burrowing and digging, you definitely want to make sure any decorations you put in there can't be undermined to where they would collapse on the animal. Very important. I've seen it before in years past where customers had this big rock ledge built up, and then of course these guys being burrowers, they dig and dig the bottom of it out, and unfortunately it can collapse on the animal, so which is very dangerous. So make sure whatever furnishings you put in, either make sure it's like light pieces of cork bark or wood. Make sure it's very thoroughly secured when you're styling your enclosure. Diet for these guys is fairly straightforward. We know they're an insectivore, so we recommend feeding calcium dusted insects daily. So that can be in the form of crickets, roaches, worms, things like that. Crickets and roaches can definitely be the staple diet. And then make sure, of course, that they're dusted with a high quality calcium supplement and multivitamin 1 time per week. As far as humidity for these guys is concerned, we know that they're a higher humidity species, so we like to shoot for a humidity range with the African fire skink of anywhere from 60 to 70% relative humidity. That is a little bit more on the humid side, but if you have lots of live plants and that thick substrate layer in there, as long as it's originally moistened to the correct level, you shouldn't have many issues with humidity with these guys. You might spray down once a day, especially if you have a very open screen top. A lot of people otherwise, you might spray down the enclosure heavily once every other day. It will depend on what your ambient humidity is in the room, so always double check your humidity levels with a high quality digital hygrometer such as ZoomEd's digital thermometer hygrometer combo. As far as handling with these guys is concerned, these guys naturally can be a little bit more flighty of a species. And as you see here, I have my friend in this little cup because they're not super wild about handling. But having said that, I have in the past seen these guys be very, very tame, similar to some Schneider skinks and things like that. So the more you work with them, the more you try to build up a relationship and hand feed them, they can tame down quite nicely, but it is going to be dependent on how much work you're putting into it. In general though, African fire skink, it's definitely more of a species to enjoy the natural behaviors and enjoy taking care of it in a beautiful live planted environment, rather than a pet that's going to sit there and watch television with you, if that makes sense. But these guys can be tamed down quite a bit, but in general, they can be a flightier species. As far as daily cares for these guys is concerned, you're going to want to be double checking your humidity daily. A lot of times people will use automatic misting systems, and that can be beneficial with taking a little bit of the work off as far as daily maintenance. So every day, going to check your humidity, make sure your humidity is good. At least once a week, I like to double check my basking temperatures, make sure that things are good, especially around times of year where the temperature's fluctuating a lot. Like right now, we're in early spring, so the temperatures are going up and down wildly. Always want to double check your basking spot because that can vary with your room temperature. You're going to want to make sure the animal has a fresh dish of water at all times. So, of course, these guys love to dig. They love to kick bedding into their water bowl. So you always want to make sure, even if it's dirty, go ahead and swap that out. Make sure it is fresh, dechlorinated tap water. And then as far as feeding is concerned, of course, you're going to offer them insects daily. And then obviously if there's still insects remaining in the enclosure, just remember, don't continue to throw insects in there if you have some left, because otherwise the crickets can predate kind of on the lizard or just be an annoyance rather. So make sure if you have any dead bugs or anything like that, spot clean as needed. If there's any large feces, urates, or messes like that, you want to take that out as soon as possible. Even with a bioactive tank, the more you keep on top of that kind of stuff, it can be a lot easier for you down the road.